need of something else.
I thought there for a moment, Brian, when you were saying that sometimes the best option is staring you in the face, that was a come and get me plea.
Isn't Rog the next man to get called in? Although we're not in a rush to get rid of Mike Catt just yet. But no. I think the point that I make about Paulie having an ability to be able to explain what he means, I think I might struggle with that. As much as I enjoy a little bit of coaching with the TV work, I think. I don't know on field would I be best positioned to be able to get across my point as it is in my head. I suppose I've never had to challenge myself with that. Maybe I'd be able to adapt into understanding it. Pardon?
Surely you did it as a player in game. You had to figure things out all the time and pass on instructions, and you were a brilliant reader of the game. So there's no reason why you couldn't do it off the pitch.
Yeah, maybe, but I the thing about it is if I was to get into it, and I'm probably too far removed from the game at this stage, if I was getting into a coaching role, it would be definitely in the way that Paulie's gotten in. I just wouldn't want to be 24/7. I do enjoy some of the other things that I do, working with some of the companies that I work with, working on some of my own stuff. So I would not want to commit 100% of my time to a coaching role, but it's pretty difficult to go, I think I'll do some coaching. I'd like an international job. It's kind of hard to jump there. And I guess ultimately Paulie did a bit of an apprenticeship though as well with the Irish under-20s. And I would imagine that he's been in a lot of dialogue with Andy Farrell over the course of the last 18 months or whatever, 15 months since Andy's taken over. I know that he was in constant communication with Joe Schmidt around a few other things. So he's got a very strong opinion of how he wants things to come across. He's a clever guy and a lot of what he says is quite thought-provoking, but it's I think you couldn't anticipate there being a better person to bring into an Irish environment.
Yeah. Let's get into your selection. So this isn't what you think Andy Farrell is necessarily going to do. This is what you would do if you got that big gig. If you got the call, Brian, come pick the starting 15 for the Six Nations opener against Wales. Let's start with the pack then. What's your front row?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned, Nathan, that you're going to be like, I think it's a bit of a snorefest team. I when I wrote it down last night and sent it over to JP, the producer, I did send it with the caveat that I would anticipate that there aren't going to be that many shocks and oohs and ahs from people that hear it. On the basis that the guys that I'm picking, obviously a number of them I've played with or I've trained with, but also I don't think there's been that much of a standout performer since we saw the internationals back in November. And albeit it was pretty patchy, some of the performance, some good stuff at times against France and Wales, and then a kind of a real regression in the game against Georgia, but then finishing with a positive, albeit it wasn't a perfect performance against Scotland. Having looked at all the provincial games, I haven't seen anything that I feel is going to vastly improve the guys that finished up in November. So on the basis of that, my front row, depending on whether Tadhg Furlong is fit or not, I'm going to pick Andrew Porter because I think Tadhg Furlong, it's a bit fanciful to think that he's going to start against Wales. So I'm going to go Andrew Porter, Rob Herring and Cian Healy as my front row because Cian Healy, I think, picks himself. Dave Kilcoyne, when he comes back from fitness, has the potential to push Cian again. Porter, I thought, was very good. He was one of Ireland's real consistent players, a very important player throughout the end of the Six Nations in November. And then Rob Herring, I think it's a position that we're struggling a little bit in at hooker. I thought that Niall Scannell was going to be the answer a couple of years ago. I thought Kelleher was going to come through and really shine, but no one's really grasped it. And I think there's the capabilities of someone coming in and locking that position down if they show a lot of potential for their club, but then take their opportunity properly internationally.
OTB AM are doing their depth charts at the moment, and Keith Wood was on, and he's picked the same front row and similar concerns about the hooker position that we've known for years that Rory Best was coming to an end, and still we're in this position of not quite knowing in one of the key positions. And is that one of the worries of the last year, of some sort of transition, that those key roles at hooker, at scrum half, at out half, where we're looking for backup and for people to really say, I am next in line, that still hasn't happened?
No, it hasn't. And I think particularly if you look at somewhere like hooker, where you lose your best line-out operator over the last 6 or 7 years in Devon Toner, who isn't being selected anymore. And then on top of it, you've got, you look at the stats, that a huge amount of our scores originate at line-out. So if you don't get your line-out sorted, you struggle a little bit there. It has a major negative knock-on effect or connotations to the overall score line that you are able to build up. So it's definitely a concern. I think Rob Herring, his darts probably have been reasonably good. Even when we kind of muddled up a few lineouts at different times over the course of November, it felt as though it certainly wasn't his throwing that was the only time that we missed. That there was some kind of misreads and missed lifts. But I think you need a dynamic ball carrier at hooker. You really do. You need someone that's going to give you advantage line as well. And I just feel as though he's a little bit on the lightweight side of things. I'm not sure what sort of scrummager he is. I think he can hold his own, but I don't think he's going to be a destructive scrummager. So yeah, I do think that. I thought Kelleher was going to be the answer, but for some reason he's just not progressed from the potential he showed in his first 6 or 9 months in the Leinster setup.
And I guess whoever it is, you've got to hope and assume with the introduction of Paul O'Connell to the coaching staff, there's going to be improvements to the line-out in general, and hopefully one of those benefits from that. On the line-out then, and the second row, who are your two selections there?
James Ryan obviously is going to be there for a long time, provided he can stay fit. He's probably potentially number one on the team sheet. So who's with him? Tig Byrne. I'm going to go for at the moment. Ian Henderson has come in and out, and sometimes he has brilliant games for Ireland, and then he plays well for Ulster, and then he goes quiet for a while, he gets injured and he's been suspended. It just feels as though he hasn't properly grasped the other second row berth. And just watching Tig Byrne a little bit, I think, again, he's probably a little bit lightweight for international rugby, but particularly the Welsh game, I like seeing him play against Welsh opposition, because he played in the Scarlets, because he's got such a big reputation over there. They were really sorry to lose him to Munster. They rate him incredibly highly. And I just think he's been very good for Munster. Obviously, we know about his ability to turn over ball, but I think he's improved his work rate, which at times has held him back a bit. He kind of dips in and out of games, but I think on the basis of what we've seen so far, he is worthy of partnering James Ryan in the second row. And
it looks as though as well he has a coach now in Andy Farrell who trusts him, because when he made that breakthrough with Scarlets before the return to Munster, he was getting minutes here and there with Joe Schmidt, but there was no real consistency of selection, where actually you look at those autumn fixtures, he was pretty much a mainstay of that side, got a lot of game time under Farrell, which obviously changes his confidence levels now in a green jersey.
Yeah, I don't know if he got on great with Joe Schmidt. I don't know whether there was a bit of a personality clash there. And sometimes with some coaches, if you do something to dirty your bib, if there's a one-off incident, or they do see you in a game, or you do something that is just not part of their checklist, I think it's hard to undo those wrongs. And I can think of kind of different coaches over the years. Jordan Murphy was the obvious one for Eddie O'Sullivan years ago. He missed a tackle against France a good few years ago, back in 2007, and I don't think Eddie ever properly, had the full trust in him thereafter. And potentially you look at the quality of Jordy. Should he have had more than 50 caps? Probably. But it was just because himself and Eddie didn't see eye to eye. And I think there's definitely that in all team environments, that coaches have favourites, they have go-to guys, and I feel as though Joe just didn't feel as though Tig Byrne was a go-to guy for him that he could 100% trust. So yeah, I think you're right. I think Andy Farrell has a lot more faith in him, and for a position that I thought we felt a couple of years ago, we were really in a strong place. All of a sudden, we look a little bit lightweight there, and I think the emergence of Ryan Baird coming through now in the next 6 to kind of 12 months, I think you'll see him partnering James Ryan undoubtedly.
That is a 6 to 9 month thing, though. You don't think it's now, and maybe that sums up Ireland's whole approach to this Six Nations. It doesn't feel as though this is a transitionary Six Nations in any way, that this is a Six Nations Ireland need to go and win as many games as possible. It's not really about experimentation.
No, it's not about experiment. It's both. It's always both. It's always trying to bring through, particularly this early in the cycle of a World Cup. You've got to think a bit more about performances and results the later the 4-year cycle goes. But early on, the first couple of years, I think it gives you an opportunity to invest in some players that you feel are going to be there at that next World Cup, but at the same time be mindful of making sure that your job is secure as head coach and that you're not on a losing streak. You look at someone like Wayne Pivac, they're sharpening the knives over in Wales already, and yet he could do no wrong in Scarlets. So I do think that you have to be mindful of both. I think Ryan Baird was going to be capped in November before he picked up his groin injury, which is very unfortunate, but he will probably get capped within this year, but I just don't know if he's ready to be a starter. I think you have to earn your crust a little bit more, albeit he shows massive potential. I think he probably just needs a little bit of hardening up at provincial level before he's kind of catapulted into being a regular starter in the Irish team. And sometimes you have to not wrap these guys in cotton wool, but you just have to be a little bit mindful, particularly if he's just come off the back of an injury, to kind of give them the confidence to get back playing provincially well, and then the next step will be an easy evolution into the national team.
What about the back row then, which is usually one of those areas where there is a lot of depth? What three have you gone for?
Well, we're all waiting for Dan Levy to get back to full fitness, aren't we? And I think you're probably looking at the guts of a year before, not a year, from when he started back again, to get his confidence up, to get his fitness levels back up, to kind of get rid of any of those shackles that he's carrying from that horrendous injury that he picked up against Ulster in the quarterfinal of the Champions Cup. It feels as though he's kind of the missing link because of what he was delivering before he got injured with Ireland, and I felt as though we really missed him at the World Cup. The ability to do he's an all-action 7, isn't he? So a groundhog, but also a ball carrier. Clever tackler. He does everything. So the quicker he can get back and fully fit and showing the potential that he had prior to his injury, I think he will be a shoe-in for 7. But in the interim, I think move that has worked pretty well. I've always liked Pete as a player, but I never saw him as a 7. But I think he's worked really well as a 7 for Munster and for Ireland in those last couple of games. So I think Peter O'Mahony at 7. It's a contract year. It's funny, how many players really, I think the subconscious, they just raise their game to another level when they know that they're out of contract. And his timing of Zebo heading to Racing 3 years ago could not have been better, because Munster couldn't lose a second player. And now all of a sudden, again, he's showing the importance to their team. Obviously, their leader, but also someone that's back, hitting a lot of really good form. And obviously his line-out option is invaluable, particularly someone like Paul O'Connell, who's coming into the fold, who's going to have a real focus on line-out. So I'm picking Pete at 7, CJ for his ball carrying at 6 again, because I don't think he has a bad game for Ireland. Sometimes he gets worked out by the bigger teams that they're able to manhandle him. But I have seen a bit of an evolution from his game. I've seen him pass the ball a hell of a lot more this year than I have done for the previous five seasons or 6 seasons with Munster and Ireland. So there's a progression coming there, and he's definitely going to soften advantage lines by becoming a distributor. But I do think you need someone with his capabilities of getting advantage line and those really hard yards, along with James Ryan. So him at 6, and then for me, one of the most exciting prospects in Irish rugby at the moment is Caelan Doris. I think he again, a different sort of ball carrier, someone that finds soft shoulders, that uses his footwork, but also has a lot of power in the collision zone too, but has the skills to go with it. He does remind me of a Jamie Heaslip of sorts, but I think he's a better ball player than Jamie Heaslip is or was. And I think he is so exciting to watch. He was man of the match a couple of times in November, and rightly so. I just feel as though he's going to be a real star for Ireland for years to come.
Because the first thing when I saw that back row, in my head I'm comparing it to some of the great back rows of the last decade or so, when you're thinking of Heaslip and Sean O'Brien and Stephen Ferris been around, and just the rawness and the doggedness of those kind of players, that it doesn't feel as though that back row, and even the options around that, and there's always plenty of options, whether it's Josh van der Fleer coming back into a bit of form, that it doesn't feel like it's quite at that world-class level that it was maybe a while back.
And I don't think it necessarily is. I'm not, not to talk down the lads that I've mentioned, because I think they're all very fine players. But I think when you're talking about really great back rows, and you think about Heaslip, O'Brien and Ferris, that was a very, very special back row. 3 very special individual players. Whereas I think, Pete has these magic moments and has huge impacts, but from a consistency over 80 minutes, does he always perform every single game? I mightn't say quite as much as someone like Sean O'Brien. And then CJ, that again, there's nothing. He's not done anything wrong, but he doesn't have that explosiveness of a Stephen Ferris. So it's easy to compare a really great back row, but these guys have also won it all. They've also, well, besides Doris, Pete and CJ have been there for the Grand Slam, for beating the All Blacks. Pete was man of the match in the All Black game in the Aviva, so he turns up for big moments. But I just don't know if they're quite in the same league as the likes of Shawnee and Ferris when they are at their very best. But there's not much in it. I think we can kind of complicate things and over dramatize the discrepancies between them. I don't think it's as vast as some people make out. And I still think that's a good back row, albeit you compare it to an English back row of Unapola, Underhill and Curry. When they're playing really well, I think they're a stronger back row, but you're going to have that international rugby, aren't you?
Let's move on then to the halfbacks. And we touched on it already. Is maybe the concern that it's so straightforward, you don't need to give this a second thought? It is still Murray and Sexton. It
is. They're the best two players in their positions in Ireland still. And, I watch and try and be as critical as I possibly can in my head to understand their performances, but it's their ability to make things happen and to keep the game plan working when things start going awry. I think that's where they differentiate themselves. And lots of players can have good one-off performances, but there's a calmness and a consistency to both of them. And certainly in Johnny's case, we're crying out for another number 10 to emerge and kind of really put pressure on him. And Joey Carberry, we thought, was the answer to that. And I'm not sure. It's not a like for like type, 10 operating there with Joey and Johnny. But with Johnny, his ability to pick the right pass is very, very special. And until he's gone, until we see that next player come through, we have been poxed with Humphreys, with Raj and with Sexton over the last 17 years, 18 years. The quality of those players, even longer. I started playing with David Humphreys back in 2000. So the quality of those 3 out halves is very special. And I think it's a lofty standard to get to for the next player. And I think sometimes you don't fully appreciate players until they're gone. And I think that will be the case in these latter years with Johnny Sexton. We know about the brilliant years, but even now he's consistently so good at making good decisions. And people calling for Jack Carty to come in and the heir to the throne. I don't see Jack Carty being on the same page or the same quality as Johnny Sexton. I just don't see it. I think he has those brilliant moments, but I think internationally, again, that's another situation where he had his chance in the World Cup and it didn't transpire, and that's left an indelible mark with the likes of Andy Farrell. So for me, it's an easy selection of Johnny and Connor, and people will go, what about John Cooney? Where is he? He's playing really well again. There must be something up in camp, or be it personality wise, or be it not being able to show the right thing at training, or be able to do what Andy Farrell wants to do. Because we're obviously watching some good John Cooney performances, but there's something there that we don't fully know and can't make a proper decision on, because we don't have that intel. And I guess maybe one day when Andy Farrell is finished with the Irish job, he'll be able to inform us as to what the missing link with John Cooney is.
I'm sure you saw that as well during your playing days, where there was excitement in the media about a player who's shooting the lights out in the Pro 14, and when they come into camp as players, you're probably excited to see what they're about as well. And then that little step up to international level isn't always there for everybody.
It's and you do really need to train with someone, and that's why being an analyst or being a pundit is sometimes difficult, because with new guys, you can watch them in games, but then to get a full appreciation for someone, you need to be able to see them train and to see their intellect, their ability to be able to to read different situations with minimal time. And I think, some players like Jacob Stockdale's a good example of that. I think you can see the athlete, but I think sometimes the decision making hasn't been second nature to him. I think it's something that he's had to really work on. But yet the quality of the athlete is so great. That's what's kept him in there. But there's definitely been other guys that you've thought, wow, this guy looks fantastic, and he comes in and he just doesn't get something, or it takes too long to drill something into to understand how the unit works or what the defensive system is. And sometimes it might be 3, 4, 5 times before he gets it, and you're like, you can't afford to do that internationally. So there's always going to be those guys, and that's why sometimes I'm enviable. I wish I could be there to see the quality in training, because you can also see the body language with the great players. They're a bit like a quarterback, and their wide receivers, they're go-to players for the likes of Sexton and Murray. On the flip side to that, someone like Keith Earls, right? People couldn't understand how Keith Earls was making the team, but he used to make a show of us at training when he'd be on the opposition before he started breaking through into the team. And that's why I've always been a big fan of him. I definitely feel as though the starting halfback pairing, as much as people will guffaw at it, is definitely Sexton and Murray.
The starting centre pairing then, it's a interchangeable lot, because somebody always seems to be injured. At the moment, Gary Ringrose is still out with the jaw problem, but there's an expectation maybe he might be able to get some game time against Munster in a couple of weeks, and if he does, you'd expect he's back and available. If they are all fit, who are the two?
Yeah, I think Gary's the obvious choice at 13. I think he brings the best balance irrespective of who you play at 12. And as much as Chris Farrell's been good with Ireland any time that he's come in, I think you play a slightly different game with him. And it becomes more attritional, even though he has nice soft hand. But Gary Ringrose can do some stuff that all the other centres can't do. And that's why, for me, he's the obvious choice at 13 when he's fit. Then at 12, it's almost a shame that Farrell doesn't see himself as a 12 at all, because I feel as though he's not going to get as many caps because Gary Ringrose is there, because whenever he's fit, he'll be selected ahead of him. So maybe Farrell should consider trying to play a little bit of rugby at 12 and see him as, maybe he does see himself as a viable option there. But in that jersey, I think Robbie Henshaw's played really well for Leinster the last while. He's been, so he's been kind of nominated. He might have gotten a player of the month last month. He's been very effective. And as much as I haven't seen a huge amount of Connacht, just haven't seen as much written or spoken about Bundy. So for me at the moment, it's always a close run thing with Bundy and Robbie Henshaw. So I would just think that Robbie's done enough to get back into the starting 15.
To wrap it up then, the back three, there's again plenty of options there and plenty of players who can play in multiple positions. What would you go with right now?
I'm going to start at full back, and I think I want stability there and certainty, and I think Hugo Keenan offers that. He's been selected there ahead of Jordan Larmour the beginning of this season before Jordan got injured. It feels as though he's Leinster's number one fullback, and I think ultimately he'll be Ireland's number one fullback, unless Shane Daly can come in and displace him. He looks as though he's someone that kind of fits that mould as well, but is exciting, is an exciting attacker as well. So I guess I want to see more from Shane Daly. His ability to play on the wing and fullback as well, looks as though it's pretty seamless. I don't love Jacob Stockdale at fullback. I think he can have his moments, but I think he's a player that thrives on confidence scoring tries, and he will score more tries for Ireland on the wing than he will at fullback. And I think you just need to get him the opportunity one-on-one to beat players, because that's where he becomes a world-class operator. I think he's got some flaws in the rest of his game, but he's able to paint over them because of what he's capable of doing one-on-one with players, with opposition. The strength and power, but also even the chip and chase, and his ability to beat players. And if he can, even his distribution in the Georgian match, one of the passes will call forward, but really good quality passing. So he's got that in his game too. I just feel as though get him back on the wing where he built his confidence, built his career initially, because I think that's where he will be at his most prolific.
So you've gone with Stockdale and Earls as... And
Earlsy, yeah. James Lowe obviously will come back into the mix. He had a really good debut. And I think he will be in there. I don't know who he's going to displace yet, but for me, I think Heath Earls is our number one winger, to be honest with you. I think he's in ahead of Jacob Stockdale from a consistency point of view. I think what he offers going forward is this electrifying speed, brilliant footwork, but I think he understands defence way more than all the other back three players that we have, understanding when to play high, but also watching body language of the opposition out half and scrum half to preempt when the ball is going to be kicked and to find himself in the right space and protect his fullback. So I think Keith Earls, even though he's starting to push on now, doesn't look as though he's lost any pace, and his very low error count, and looks as though he's going to create something every time he gets the ball, provided he gets it in space. And sometimes when he doesn't even get it in space, I think he still has the capabilities of beating players one-on-one. But his overall performance, good in the air, really worked hard on his kicking game. I really like Keith Earls, always have liked Keith Earls in Irish teams. And you look at how many tries he scored, 32 or 33 tries. So he knows how to get it done.
So talking about that step up from club to international, what does James Lowe need to do? What's he got to do over the next year, 18 months to ensure that he's getting into that starting 15?
Well, I think, there was times that you look at some of the work rate, particularly from that Johnny May try. I think, he could have worked a lot harder, a lot earlier. And those moments that it won't just happen for you internationally. I think you've got to make it happen. And it's what he's been able to do at a provincial level, particularly Pro 14, but also in Europe. He's not going to be able to get as much access to playing that type of game internationally. There simply isn't that space. The hits are bigger. The speed is quicker. Time on the ball is less. So I think he's going to have to sharpen all aspects of his game. Yes, he offers something that nobody else does, and that's what makes him a great tool to have. But I think the graft and the expectation of working with his pendulum and working for the team when, particularly you're not on the front foot as we weren't against England. I think when things are going badly, you still have to, put your hand up and deliver yourself, even in a losing team. And I just don't think that did wonders for, for the thought process as to where he ultimately is at. I think he's going to have to earn it a little bit more, but he will get there. He's a very, very exciting player, and he's a guy that you will get people to pay to come and see. And you just need a time. We'll need consistency from him internationally. We saw one really good game and one not so good game against England. So, when the chart starts being progressively positive, I think you'll see him fitting in. And I do ultimately feel as though he will be a starter in the World Cup in 2023. I'm just not sure with who.
Okay. Where's Jordan Larmour in all this?
I think he's touch and go. He's very close with Hugo. Just his timing was unfortunate, wasn't it, with his shoulders? Let's not write Jordan Larmour off. All these players, when we're talking about them, it's not kind of definitive. I think you can fit Conway in there very easily. You could fit Shane Daly in there, who looks as though all these guys look as though they're good footballers. His time is probably gone, but even Dave Carney can fit in there. There's not this huge gulf between the first few and everyone else. So I just feel as though right now it's those guys, but all you need is an injury or a dip in form and someone else get their opportunity, and then it's consistency of performance thereafter will keep you in the team. The competition for places is far greater these days than when I played, so you have to constantly be on it and never give up your spot. So it's challenging, to go long periods staying in a jersey. You really have to be an exceptional player.
Do you see any change in captaincy?
No, not for now. No, I don't. I think Johnny's still learning his craft. I think as much as he was berated. I wouldn't say I berated him, but I was honest and said it wasn't a good look what he did previously. He's also made some excellent decisions and some really ballsy decisions. Even at the weekend, I was shaking my head in the Leinster game as to why they're 5 points up, guarantee the winning of the match with a penalty with 2 minutes to go, but he kicked to the corner, and I would still wonder whether that's a smart move or not. But they got the bonus point try and they got 5 points out of the game versus 4. So those small things. Sometimes maybe I was thinking, all right, well done, 1-0 Johnny on that, rather than thinking I as a captain would have thought let's win the game, but he kind of thinks bigger picture sometimes as well, and when you go big sometimes you don't get it, and you'll get a slap on the wrist for it from people, but I think he's really evolving as a leader, and as much as he's fiery, and we saw that reaction in the French game, that's ultimately what makes him function. And you're going to have to take a little bit of the bad with the really good stuff, because we've been very fortunate to see a lot of good stuff in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's for sure. Brian, great stuff as always. Thanks a lot for running through that.
Cheers, Nathan.
Go back to one of your many day jobs.
See you
Baker,
later.
homeschooler, one of them. Good luck.
Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.